on cedar removal. And so kind of I'll go through the history of the Sandhills Task Force to kind of give you an idea of what we do and how we came to be, and then go through some of our work with private landowners with a focus on the eastern red cedar encroachment in the Sandhills, and then talk a little bit about the benefits of the partnerships we have developed between the different organizations, and then talk about what we need as conservationists to help the landowner and what the landowner needs to continue to do good conservation and to take care of cedar in the Sandhills. The task force was founded in 1993 by a group of progressive landowners as well as different agencies. Agencies that were partners then included the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, the Nebraska Cattlemen, the Nebraska Game and Parks, the Nebraska RC&Ds, the NRDs, the Nebraska Association of County Officials, and Protect Our Water Resources. So when it was founded, that's who's kind of our partners that helped found the Sandhills Task Force. Today, it's a 16-member board of directors with representatives from the Fish and Wildlife Service, the Nebraska Cattlemen, the Game and Parks, the Natural Resource Districts, the county commissioners, the Nature Conservancy, Ducks Unlimited, and NRCS. And then most of our board members, over half our board members, are ranchers or make their living primarily from ranching. It's a cooperative effort between the agencies and the ranchers. They got together and they developed what is called the Sandhills Management Plan. It was kind of the first strategic plan that the task force put together. And since then, the strategic plan has been updated, and we're working on an update right now, but it addresses education, technical assistance, acquisitions through conservation easements, legislation, financial support, and lease agreements. We were recognized as a 501c3 nonprofit in 1999, and then a land trust in 2000. So that's kind of where we're at. In 2018, there's always been a project coordinator, or somebody who kind of works with the projects. In 2018, I was hired, and then Shelley Kelly, our director, she was the project coordinator before me, and then she was promoted to the executive director right around then. There was some difference leeway in those years, but it was right about then. We then later in 2019 hired through our partnerships with different organizations and the Nature Conservancy, a burn boss for our prescribed burn coordinator, which has helped us ramp up our prescribed burning for cedar control in the Sandhills. And then this year we initiated our Sandhills Stewards program, and that's a program that provides technical assistance and education throughout the Sandhills to help keep ranchers ranching. So it just kind of still developing, and we're still working through it, but they're starting to do a lot of educational programs, our new hire on that program. Our work with private landowners began in 1995 with projects. That's when our first project was completed, was in 1995. Since then, we have completed projects on approximately 270,000 acres, and half of those acres are just in the last 7 years of work. So it kind of started slow, and we're ramping up. Half of our projects are brush management, which include mechanical cedar removal, prescribed fire for cedar removal, Russian olive removal, and honey locust control. Most of it is cedar mechanical control. There's been 12 completed prescribed fires since 1995. And then the other half of our projects includes stream and wetland projects, lake projects, and grazing projects. I want to talk a little bit about how we go through our different projects before we dive right into cedar, just to give you an idea of kind of the things that the task force is out on the ground doing. We work with landowners to implement grazing infrastructure and grazing management projects. How we work through that is we want to maintain structural diversity on the landscape. So heterogeneity of grasses across the landscape. So to do that, we work with landowners to get properly stocked season-long or rotational grazing systems, and we want to keep those pasture sizes fairly large. That isn't always the case, but for the most part, our pasture sizes run from 400 to 640 acres when we put in a system and we're providing cost share towards a system. We minimize the watering locations. We like to talk with landowners about grazing meadows in rotation with haying, just so they're not always cutting that grass at the same time every year. And then we want to ensure productivity with grazing, proper stocking rate, and also include with that a drought plan. So rotational grazing really helps with drought planning as well as prescribed fire planning. We work that in whenever possible. Our wetland and stream restoration projects are mostly we work to mitigate the effects of stream incision. So as streams downcut because of ditching or other events, the plant community changes. We get decreased wildlife habitat for waterfowl as well as grazing wildlife because there's a decrease in forage production for grazing and or haying, so that decreases for the grazing wildlife habitat. And there's also, we see an increase in stream bank erosion during high water events as those streams in size. And in doing that, we we provide cost share and technical assistance towards restoring that water to elevation with the use of hard structures or meander reconstruction. And that's an ever-changing field on those structures. And each project we do, we learn something new. It's a lot of fun to work with. We do lake renovations, so we'll put in carp exclusion screens like is shown on the picture there. And then we work with the Game and Parks Fisheries Division to rote known those lakes and restock the lakes. And we just completed a couple of those projects this year, so that's exciting. Sometimes that takes a long time to complete just because of how extensive and how many landowners are involved in those projects. Now, what I really want to talk about is how we work with landowners through our Eastern Red Cedar projects. Our first Eastern Red Cedar project was completed in 2001 with a total of 20 acres, a cost of $2,500 of total project cost. I believe it was associated with a wetland where cedar were cut out around a wetland. It was a very small project. And then in 2007 is when we really started completing multiple projects per year. There wasn't much going on between 2001 and 2007, just a handful of projects with a total acreage influence of 3,000 or 3,300 and a total project cost of $30,000, which would actually work out to be about $9 an acre. And then in 2020, we completed 23 cedar removal projects on 23,700 acres. Our average project cost went up to $28 an acre, and that's increasing as we move through the years, just due to increased cost of inflation, more projects, so contractors aren't as hungry for the work, as well as higher density cedars out there. So the higher density the cedar, the more it costs to cut. Today, as I speak today, we have 29 projects, cedar removal projects, where funds have been obligated. We have 14 additional projects that are in the agreement process. So we have about a total of 43 cedar removal projects that will be completed should be completed prior to the end of 2022, or possibly a little bit into 2023. I believe most of those projects should be completed by May 2022. So we have quite a few projects that will be getting done by the end of 2022. I think I meant to say May 2021. I'm sorry. So most should be completed by actually the May 2021. So they're being completed right now as we talk. This is a distribution of our cedar removal projects and how they distribute over the state and over the Sandhills. We have cedar removal projects in most every county, which shows how cedar is a problem and has become a problem in almost every county of the Sandhills. And so our most of our projects are in the Loop, Garfield, and Wheeler County area. And this is mostly due to the Working Lands for Wildlife program through the EQIP, through NRCS. So they have a special fund where we can go in and help landowners. NRCS pays for part of the project and the partners pay for part of the project. We always cost share at a 75% rate. So the landowner always contributes 25%. That is based on our grants. And that just helps the landowner have a buy-in with the project and is more likely to keep those trees off the property if he had put something into the project to begin with. But we also in Wheeler County with 25 landowners and almost 27,000 acres just in Wheeler County. That's also because we have a very progressive landowner in that area who talks with his neighbors. That landowner is now on the board of directors of the Sandhills Task Force, and we appreciate his work towards conservation in the Sandhills. The next areas where we have a lot of projects include Cherry, Thomas, and Brown County, somewhat due to the Working Lands for Wildlife program in Brown County. And then in Cherry and Thomas County, it's just some progressive landowners who have talked to their neighbors. And so we work in large blocks of land with multiple landowners. So here's just some photographs of the different projects we work on, just to kind of give you an idea of the cedar level that's out there. I'm sure most of you have seen this driving around and just different projects you've worked on. We go from anywhere from really high density cedar to lower density cedar. The task force really will help anybody that wants help. The density really doesn't matter. It may just change how we tackle the project, whether it's a prescribed fire or a cut and stuff and burn or a cut project. So this was a Wheeler County project. It was 866 acres. All the trees were shredded. So some trees are shredded and some are cut and piled. Like this project, a lot of steep slopes in Thomas County on 1,400 acres. And so the steep slopes, they cut and piled those trees. The trees were just so large. And it just too much money to shred them. But we try to have the contractor shred the trees whenever possible. Cuts down on the amount of piles that are there for landowners to have to burn later. This is another Wheeler County project. It was 570 acres. Again, all trees were shredded. Pictures I usually take when we inspect, and a lot of our inspections happen in the fall and winter when we're allowed to cut trees, and so sometimes the pictures don't quite match up, but you can still have an idea of how it looks with no cedar versus a lot of cedar. And then this was a Rock County project, and this was not planted. The cottonwood trees maybe were planted. They looked like they maybe had been planted in rows, but the cedars were not planted, but it's very similar to a shelter belt. And we removed all the cedar underneath those trees. We do remove cedar shelter belts, and we have removed unused cedar shelter belts for landowners to work on getting rid of the seed source in the Sandhills. And we'd like to do more of this, but it just is, those cedar shelter belts are very useful for those landowners. So if they use them, they can keep them. If they don't use them, we like to talk with them about having that cedar belt removed. And this is a prescribed fire in Garfield County on 270 acres, and it was a prescribed burn, and we just did quite a bit of he did quite a bit of work of cutting and stuffing, but not a lot. We had just a really good burn day. He was able to get rid of the burn, or get rid of a lot of cedar trees. I'm sorry, I didn't catch you. What did you say?
3 minutes.
Okay. Okay, we'll just skip that because I probably don't have time to show you the video, but if you want to see the video of that project, I can sure show you later. So when we do our project selection, we work on, it's all landowner driven. So we want the landowner to be in the lead on the project. So they call us and or they contact us through a partner, and we go out and work with them and listen to their wants and needs and try to help them. We operate only within the Sandhills. We want, even through our cedar removal projects, we want good grazing management. And if there's an issue, we work with the landowner to correct that issue if we provide cost share dollars towards the project. He can graze however he wants through a rotational or season long or high intensity grazing system. But we want to make sure he's removing the right amount of AUMs or grass, and leaving enough grass for wildlife and for the health of the rangeland. We usually don't cost share on projects less than $1,000 of total project costs. That's just a rule of, just kind of where a little rule of thumb we use just to determine if we are going to put in the resources of the project. We want to make sure we're paying ourselves the right amount and that kind of thing. We do want to do more cedar shelter belt removal, and projects are more attractive to us if we are going to remove some shelter belts. When we work with private landowners, I talk with them about the partnerships up front. So I ask them who they want to partner with, and we go from there, and then I invite partners to come out and look at the projects. I always explain funding sources and our stipulations because of these funding sources to the landowners up front, and they really appreciate that. They really appreciate us being very open with them and what we can and cannot do because of our funding or because of our partners or just because it doesn't fit within our program. If needed, we cooperatively develop a grazing plan. We talk about follow-up management early. So how are they going to control those trees? That's important because a lot of landowners don't really know how they're going to control those trees. They don't understand that a large flush of trees is going to come back after those are cut. We want to execute our bid process as efficiently as possible because we require bids to base our cost share on the lowest bid to make sure we're spending our dollars in the best and most efficiently way as possible. So we want to make that bid process very easy for the landowner. And we have a 10-year agreement with the landowner. And so we want to make sure we explain that to the landowner and why we have that 10-year agreement. We're just protecting our investment of cutting those trees or doing another project and making sure that the landowner is maintaining that project for 10 years. And I'm always flexible. There's always ways to help the landowner get what he or she wants, and flexibility is the key. So when I create partnerships or when the task force makes partnerships, we benefit by bringing those partners in early at the landowner's request. So those partners can see the project and see how it fits within their programs. We facilitate those projects, and that's been the success of the task force and how it began. And I always try to serve as a main point of contact for the landowner between the partners and myself and the task force. It just helps if that landowner has one person to contact instead of 5 different partners. If 5 partners are involved in a project, it just is easier for the landowner. Of course, there's tons of benefits to partnerships. Here's just a few. We're able to help more landowners because we can spread our dollars farther across the landscape. We help establish those and maintain those relationships between the agencies and the landowners, and it saves on paperwork. So if Fish and Wildlife Service is doing an endangered species review, I don't have to do it, but I can, so it saves my paperwork, but I can work on the landowner agreement while the Fish and Wildlife Service is doing some other type of paperwork. So it spreads out the workload amongst the partners, which is very beneficial for us and the landowner. It just helps us to be able to move faster and to get more projects done. These are partners in the Sandhills with cedar control programs, and I'm sorry if I've left anyone off. I try to catch everybody. I know the Nebraska Game and Parks sometimes has an agreement with the Northern Prairie Lands Trust, and they do work with cedar removal as well. And I didn't get their logo on there, I'm sorry. The Nebraska Grazing Lands Coalition and the Nature Conservancy each have prescribed fire planning capabilities. And then the other entities usually have a cost share program or a technical assistant program that landowners can take advantage of. There's some needs we have as conservationists.
Ashley?
Yeah.
Do you have much left, or can you?
Nope, this is the last slide.
Perfect. Sorry.
Sorry. They have the ability to cut and burn cedar year-round, regardless of the cost share program. So burning and cutting cedar benefits outweigh the cost events that it'll take with regards to nesting birds habitat. We're improving that nesting bird habitat, and we need to be able to get the trees off to improve that. If we could cut year-round, that would help us restore more acres per year and help those nesting birds have more land per year. Educational opportunities and manufactured windbreaks. This is something I'm starting to work on. It's kind of in the beginning stages and how that program will go. But I think we need to talk more about not planting cedar and maybe building windbreaks instead of planting windbreaks. Again, conversations on the removal of unused shelter belts. I think landowners just don't think about that. I mean, they don't think about what that seed source is how that seed source is contributing to their work. And if they're not getting a benefit from the shelter belt, it may just need to be removed. Understanding and flexible partners. So just being able to work with the landowner and to work with the different partners, which I think we all do. Continued educational opportunities and prescribed burning. We're ramping up and doing a lot of educational programs. A lot of the agencies are, and it's great. And I think we just need to continue that. And then just public awareness on cedar and cedar encroachment in the Sandhills. So that's basically all I had. This is my contact information if anybody's interested in our programs or wants more information.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Ashley. You do have a couple questions. Let me stop recording.